Welcome to Mid Maryland Votes, episode 23, The Shot. How bad can it get? COVID injuries from the vaccine. They said it was safe, they said it was necessary, they made it mandatory. For millions, the COVID-19 vaccine was a condition of employment, education, or even basic freedoms. Most complied, some questioned, but a growing number paid a price no one warned them about. Join Mark, Ethan, and special guest Ken Buckler as they discuss the severe adverse reactions following mandatory COVID vaccinations. Not rumors, not politics, but real people with real injuries. And now here is the panel.
City.
Thank you.
So we were talking a little earlier about experiences, and I don't know if you've done an article about it on Radio Free, but there's been a lot of talk lately. I saw something on Rogan recently where they were talking about the fallout and damage caused by the COVID vaccines. Have you guys done any articles on that?
So we've done a few. One of them was, of course, my own article on my COVID vaccine injury. Which
Would you mind talking about it here?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I won't go into the full details.
Whatever you'd like to share.
And really the main reason I'm not going to go into the full details is because it'll be too lengthy. But all of it's out there on the internet. And in fact, there's actually an organization that I recently contributed a very detailed account to, and that's called React 19. They're a nonprofit, and they were specifically set up to create advocacy and help out people who are injured by the COVID vaccine. But I'm happy to share a brief synopsis of my story. So back in 2020, 2021, in fact, most of my career, I was a federal contractor. And back when the COVID vaccine was, finally released and starting to take off, I got advance notice that they were going to be mandating the vaccine for all the federal employees, all the federal contractors. At the same time, I also got advance notice that they were probably going to be pulling the Johnson & Johnson vaccine off the market. Now, I had done my research about the different vaccines. So the Johnson & Johnson was the more traditional delivery vector. It was not an mRNA-based vaccine. It still used the same spike protein as the other vaccines, but it was a more traditional delivery vector. I was like, all right, well, I have to take this because if I didn't take it, for one, my boss at the time, like I said, I was a federal contractor, he had expressed sentiment to me already that anyone who didn't get the vaccine, he thought that they should have their health care taken away. And he also thought that if they got sick because they didn't get the vaccine, then they got what was coming to them and they deserved it. Well, at the time, my wife had just gotten out of the hospital, and I was taking care of her. She had to take care of her. Well, the last thing I could do is lose my income, lose my ability to provide health care for her because she had regular doctors, follow-ups, and everything else. So that, and I knew that the mandate was coming. And I'm like, all right, well, out of all of them, the Johnson & Johnson seems to be the one that's least risky. I'm going to take that one. So I went and I took it. About 6 hours after taking the vaccine, I started experiencing body-wide pain, and my heart started racing. Well, anybody else probably would have actually gone to the emergency room. I probably should have gone to the emergency room at the time, but I was in the middle of taking care of my wife. I could go. So I pushed through it, and, after I pushed through it, I just said, all right, I'm going to bed. And that was the start of, for at least a year and a half, probably longer, where I was in varying levels of constant pain. Now, I did find ways to address that pain. Typically, that was through very large amounts of painkillers. That's not healthy. So I had to find an alternative. I actually then was like, well, I'm a federal contractor. I am not allowed to take CBD. I don't care. I started taking CBD. Let me tell you something. CBD probably saved my life because that is what kept my pain levels manageable. I still had to take painkillers every once in a while too, but CBD is what kept my pain levels manageable. Now I
Can you
got
explain what CBD is for?
CBD is a cannabinoid based derivative. So basically, it's based upon cannabis. They take the parts of cannabis that aren't the THC based. They take the rest of it, and
THC being what makes you high.
THC makes you high, and they take the rest of it and they create supplements out of it, and then it works for pain management. It very commonly used by cancer patients, and that's that's how I managed to manage my pain. But now I got a problem because as a federal contractor, I'm not allowed to take CBD because it still might show up as cannabis in a drug test.
Mhm.
So I said, all right, well, I'll just hope they don't drug test me, and I will start looking for another job. And finally, after about 6 months of searching, I found another job, uh, which was no longer in the federal space. And now I'm in addition to running Radio Free Up City, I do have another job where I'm doing market analysis for cybersecurity.
What's so interesting is that you, by no means, are you the only person that I've run across who
Yeah.
has had issues from the COVID vaccine. But I remember right off the bat, it was pushed very heavily,
Very.
and for good reasons. There certainly were some good reasons behind it. On balance, as we get more and more data coming in, it's more questionable. But one thing that I do remember very specifically is that the CEO of the largest hospital network in America was giving an interview right when the vaccine came out. He was asked, "Are you going to require your healthcare, your employees,
Yeah.
your healthcare workers to take it?" And he said no. And that, of course, was the first time that I was aware of someone against the grain, saying something different. And the reporter asked him, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, because it hasn't been tested."
Yeah.
And there was another news report, completely different organization, et cetera, a number of weeks later, where it was a reporter just talking about how when he was getting his vaccine, he just asked the nurse, "Hey, have you gotten the vaccine yet?" And she said, "No, I haven't." And he said, "Oh, why not?" She said, "Well, I haven't had any children yet." He's like, "Hmm." So he called the CEO of that hospital,
Yeah.
and he said, "So, what? How is it that that you're that we're asking other individuals, other people to take the vaccine, and you're not requiring it of your own healthcare employees?" And he said the exact same thing. This reporter said the response he got was the exact same from that initial person I mentioned, and he said, "Well, it hasn't had enough time to be studied yet."
Yeah.
And so there, from the outset, there were legitimate questions. Obviously there was a global health crisis. There was a hysteria that was well founded in many ways, I believe. But from the outset, that there clearly was another perspective, and essentially that got no discussion, no airtime.
And it was more than just no discussion.
It was censored.
It was absolutely censored.
If you had
Um,
an opposing opinion about the vaccines,
Well, I was censored just for sharing my own vaccine story.
Mhm.
And to this day,
Mhm.
I'm still criticized by people, and people say that I'm spreading misinformation just by sharing my own personal story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not big into politics and partisan politics, but there is no doubt that there was a storyline on the vaccines, and if you didn't march in lockstep with what the administration was saying about it, you were persona non grata. You were going to be treated like like an enemy of the state. Even the Facebook founder, what's his name? What's the dude's name?
Zuckerberg. Yep.
Zuckerberg came out in a congressional and said that he had been pressured over and over and over by the then administration, which was the Biden administration,
Yeah.
to remove content that was critical of the vaccines. Even Joe Rogan, the probably greatest podcaster we've ever known now, with the audience that he has, even he was censored when he talked. He dared to talk about products that could help you,
Right.
through the whole vaccine situation. So
And when Elon Musk, when he purchased X or Twitter, he actually released emails
Yeah.
from the previous owner of Twitter, that where the FBI and Twitter were in email conversations with each other, and basically quite blatantly the government saying we want you to censor this
Yeah.
and this and this, and so there was a very disturbing, highly disturbing amount of censorship going on regarding COVID.
and let's face reality: if you have a censored media, you don't have a media at all.
Right. Yeah.
There's no media there.
Absolutely.
What you have is a state propaganda.
Yeah, and to this day, there are still some lingering remnants of that. Now, the social media platforms have significantly dialed it back. But with that said, a lot of what remains is now people who believed the party line, so to speak, and refuse to break from that, refuse to consider new information. Anytime that I share my vaccine injury story, I am always criticized. All right, people always tell me that I'm making it up, but my favorite is that, well, you it couldn't have possibly been the vaccine, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, funny you should say that, because I'm pretty sure that our local hospital that diagnosed it as being caused by the vaccine, I think they're hiring right now. So I think that if you take your medical credentials and present them to the local hospital, that they might hire you. And amazingly, they usually disappear after that and never respond.
Well, let's face reality. These people have a vested interest in refuting your testimony, because they bought into it. They bought 100% into it.
Yeah.
They were the ones who were, telling people they had to get vaccinated. They vaccinated their own children. So they can't open their mind to the possibility that they've taken in this dangerous, experimental shot, and their children, and they lived through all of those restrictions. I mean, these are some of the same people that were calling the police because they saw people without masks, or they had 6 people at their house or whatever, right? They have a vested interest in their own perception of themselves, right? If the COVID vaccine does damage people, then everything they believed is a lie, and they can't go there.
So I've been running across individuals who, as they've had issues with the vaccine, they have talked to their doctors, and their doctors have actually acknowledged that there is a connection, like a literal acknowledgement that there's a connection between the vaccine and the issues that these individuals are having. And if you were to, there's apparently a name that is being used by the medical community called, I believe, spikeopathy. Okay. And what it is essentially is that what it seems like they are finding out from a medical perspective is that these spike proteins. So what happens is with the mRNA is that they inject a chemical, they inject the vaccine into the human body. And in order to produce the vaccine faster, they cause the cells in our body to basically replicate the spike protein as if it was a virus, and it explodes, and these spikes go all over the human body, and they then basically they become the vaccine. Now, that second part of it, my understanding is very normal and part of the normal process. But what they have found out is that these spike proteins are different enough from all previous versions of vaccines that they actually, when they go into the human cell in order to help create the immunity, our immune systems will oftentimes read those spike proteins as a foreign invader in a way that vaccines are not normally read by our immune systems as a foreign invader. And it creates inflammation, and it is highly associated with, at this point in time, autoimmune diseases. And the last thing that seems to be associated with this spikeopathy concept that a lot in the medical community are talking about is that the spike proteins kind of, for whatever reason, they congregate in three parts of the body. They congregate in the cardiovascular system, they congregate in the neurological system, and they congregate in the reproductive system. And from the very beginning, long before this was ever an observed phenomenon, that the medical community was talking about, individuals were saying, hey, why is there such a huge increase in heart issues and neurological issues? And so there definitely is something, it seems like, going on there.
Yeah, and so a lot of my issues are neurological, so I'm no longer in constant pain anymore. I do have flare-ups still, but also there was other damage done in the process. So I actually have several years of my life that are just full of holes that I just can't remember. And
Brain fog is absolutely part of the.
yeah, well, and it actually goes beyond brain fog in that there's actually like entire periods of my life I don't remember. A lot of it's from my college years. But yeah, brain fog is an issue too. Brain fog is more than just the not being able to remember, though. It's the feeling unsure of your actions, feeling unsure of your abilities. And fortunately, that has diminished over time, but it's still that comes back every once in a while too, and it really sucks when it does because I'll be trying to do something on the computer, or, some sort of computer programming or something like that, and I'll be like, I don't know if I'm doing this right, and it's a terrifying feeling.
It feels like early onset of dementia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've experienced some of those myself. I mean, some of it could be age related, but I don't think so. And I can tell you that, Ethan, to your point about the doctors, kind of going along with it now, they're actually, agreeing. There's actually no pushback whatsoever anymore. The medical community used to push back when you came in and you said, "Hey, I've had the COVID shot. I believe it's related to the present medical condition." They would push back. They'd be like, "Nah, it's probably not." Now it's like, "Yep, probably." I mean, especially with the heart. I know cardiovascular issues are rampant, and people who got certain shots. I know that a report was just recently released, which we'll put in the comment section, that basically stated that one of the shots in particular, was particularly dangerous for heart conditions. And other ones, they rated some of the injuries at over 6 million people. The stats are pointing to.
And I'm one of the lucky ones, in that my reaction to it was just neurological. I don't have any heart issues. I do have some issues. I get winded easily, but they've checked my heart.
Very, very common condition.
And that's very common.
COVID shot.
Yeah, well, also from COVID. Yeah. That's also common from long COVID as well.
Well, that's another thing about the shots that really threw me because, a vaccine, in my opinion, the vaccine works, right?
Yeah.
You don't get the disease. I got the shot and 3 boosters, and I got COVID every single time that I got the shot. I literally got COVID 4 times. Long-term effects, we don't know. I mean, we just have no idea. But it seems like the medical community has accepted the belief and the philosophy that this COVID shot, for good or for better or worse, has done damage to people, and that we now have to deal with that fallout. Now, the pro-COVID shot people will say, well, it was worth it. Even though there's damage to a lot of people and there's a lot of illness going around, it saved lives, and I don't know that we can argue with that, but I can tell you that if I had to go back in time, I would not take the shot. I would let my company try to fire me.
And also, okay, so they say it saved lives, but also at the same time, I think it's important to realize the lives that it ruined. All right, and I'm not talking about, okay, well, yeah, I'm alive. But every month and a half, I have a flare up for a couple days, and I'm I'm not functional. I can't do anything other than be in pain, writhing in pain in bed. So is that really saving a life? In fact, I actually read about a month ago where Canada is now offering assisted suicide for COVID victims, or for COVID vaccine victims, that it's screwed them up that bad.
Wow.
That right there is a serious problem. Yeah. If we've got a vaccine that's going to do that to you, that they're only option is, yep, we'll help you take your life. That's a problem.
And so I have looked at the charts. When you look at the charts, what you do see is that for those, where when you look at a line by state of the number of deaths, the states that had the higher vaccine take rate, where the largest percentage of the population did get the vaccine, those lines go from steep to shallow, like very quickly, after February of 2022 when the vaccine came out. The estimate is that there's less than 2 million Americans that died from COVID. Maybe my numbers are off on that, but
That's about right.
Okay, good. Okay, so it's less than roughly 2 million, let's say, died from COVID, total. Well, what happens is, of that number, basically 75% of them were 65 and older, meaning that the overwhelming majority of Americans, over 60% of the population, essentially had little to no risk of dying from COVID from the very beginning. And so if 2 million Americans died, and it's possible, this report that Mark had just mentioned, that 6 million people died from a result of the fact that all-cause mortality increased. Because while you do see those lines go down, get much shallower, for COVID deaths, the percentage of the number of all-cause mortality deaths went up within 60 days of when the COVID vaccine went national. And if that number is 6 million, then the amount of deaths are 6 million, then that means that the number of people that are suffering the way that you're describing, Ken, with your experience, is many multiples of that. And so the fact that there was this pressure, it really calls into question many things as a nation, legally, but also as a society. And we really have to answer these things. We have to be aware of this and question our own actions during that time.
Oh, no doubt. And I mean, it does unfortunately break down on party lines, but it doesn't have to, and it shouldn't. It has nothing to do with the party lines, right? I mean, there was a push to normalize the vaccine and to mandate it for many, many people. And a lot of people bought into it, and unfortunately, it's bitten everybody in the butt right now. And it's worldwide, by the way.
And so when I had my vaccine injury, one of the things I did was I reached out to David Trone, who was our congressman at the time, and I sent him a very long letter saying, I'm a federal contractor. Basically I had to take the vaccine or I probably would have lost my job, etc. And about a month later, one of his staff members calls me up and is like, yeah, you should file a workers' comp claim. I'm like, well, I filed a workers' comp claim and they said that, it wasn't a workers' comp issue. And I'm like, well, we can't help you. Sorry. So, okay, great. Thanks. So the person one of the people who was one of the strongest supporters of mandating the vaccine then didn't want to take any responsibility.
Well, again, as I said, they have a vested interest. I mean, if they have to take responsibility for it, then they're no longer the good guy. Yeah. They're now part of the bad guys, right? The ones who mandated in lockstep that people get the vaccine or lose their jobs. And if they do admit that the vaccine was not only experimental but dangerous, then their whole self-image has to change from the good guy to the bad guy. And every human being wants to be the good guy in the story, not the bad guy, right?
Right.
Do you think with the present administration that we're going to see any kind of accountability?
No.
I agree. By the way, I agree 100% with you. I don't think there's ever going to be any accountability for Dr. Fauci or anybody else who pushed out misinformation out there to a dangerous experimental shot that was mandated for everybody. Yeah. I don't think there's going to be accountability, but why? Why not? Well, especially with the present administration being as conservative as it is.
Because justice is not blind, justice is green. Mm-hmm. And justice is based upon how much money do you have. And let's be honest, all the people that pushed for the vaccine and spread all the misinformation about the vaccine, they all got pretty big chunk of change. Part of which was because of the profits they made from that vaccine. So
and those pharmaceutical companies made an absolute
fortune. But at this point, I've kind of made peace with that. In that I'm probably never going to see accountability for it. I just want help. I just want more research done to try to help those of us that were injured. I want, somebody, I don't expect them to take accountability on a personal level, but I do expect the government to eventually take accountability on a government level that, okay, we made people take this. Now we're going to try to make it right.
I think with the present administration, there's a possibility of the latter.
I hope.
I think that the government will eventually take responsibility and say, you know what, they screwed up or we screwed up, and we're going to try to help people now. But it would be satisfying, wouldn't it, for some of the people in the past administration to step up and say, you know what, we blew it. We blew it. We were human. We thought this was the best course of action, but we screwed up, and we hurt some people doing it.
Yeah.
In the history of governments, I don't know that has ever happened, which is why our founding fathers said the only solution is to have as little of government as possible
In
to
that
begin
respect.
with.
Yeah.
Well, Ken, we really appreciate you coming out and sharing with us. We absolutely believe Radio Free Hub City is an awesome website and a great service that you give to the community. We appreciate you very much. We hope you continue to prosper in that endeavor. I know I go to Radio Free Hub City often for my news, especially about, like I said, about Hagerstown and that area. So we really appreciate you coming on. Any closing thoughts?
Just glad to be on here, and I'm glad that there are others out there that care about talking about truth and not just party lines. So thank you guys for that.
Yeah, no, we try to stay.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much again, Ken and Ethan, for joining us tonight. This has been Mid-Maryland Votes. If you'd like us, just share it. Who knows? Somebody you share it with might get a kick out of it too. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much for joining
Please
us.
like, follow, comment, and share, or at least one of those. Hey, if you or a loved one have been hurt by the COVID vaccine, please start your journey towards recovery at React 19. We will leave the link in our comment section. It's a good place to get started on your road towards recovering from the injuries that you have incurred. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode.